My name is Jerry Anderson, and I am the creator and producer of Space 1999. Space 1999 started its life as UFO. That was another series I made. What happened was that when UFO was completed, it ran in America on syndication, and it topped the ratings in New York and Los Angeles. These are the two most important markets in America. And as a result, the American office of ITC said they wanted a second series. I, of course, was delighted, and we started work on the second series when apparently in America, while we were doing that, the ratings started to drop. And being America, or should I say being show business in America, panic broke out, and they said, stop, we're not going to make the second series. Well, I had done a great deal of work in preparation, and we had built a very huge moon base, which was for the new UFO, and a lot of design work, uniforms and so on, and we'd spent a lot of money. And so I went along to see Lou Grade, who was a man who financed all my shows, and I said, look, it seems a pity to waste all this money. Why don't you let me twist the script around and turn it into another show? And he said, yep, I think that's a good idea. And so we started to make a science fiction series which had no title. Eventually, I came up with the idea of calling it Space 1999. The American office said, I think it's a lousy title. And throughout the production, we came up with title after title after title, and they were all rejected. Until finally we got to the point where we had to make the front titles, and the American office said, well, we can't think of anything better, so you better call it Space 1999.
There's no doubt about it. Planet Meta could be supporting life as we know it. John, the Metaprobe astronaut virus infection mustn't be allowed to stop us. We must make a manned landing on Meta. Nothing must stop us. Nothing. Good luck.
We're getting great pictures, Commander, of the Metaprobe launch platform. I'll put them up for you. There's the probe ship docking now.
Looks good. But I'd like to see it on its way to Meta.
That's the lot, Professor. It all checks out.
There's definitely no radiation leakage. We're coming in now.
Good, Steiner. Thank you.
It's an increase in brain activity. Steiner, get Nordstrom out of there. I think he's in trouble.
Security, get out there and bring Nordstrom in.
Yes, sir.
Doctor, he is in trouble. I need some help out here.
Wait, Steiner. I've got to get out of here.
Intensive care unit, please stand by. We have a casualty.
Gotta get out of here. I've got to get out of here.
Decontamination area. Come on.
Professor, he's gone berserk. I can't hold him. Let go, Nordstrom. Stop.
One of the first things that occurred to me was that with this very large model of moon base that we had built, we would have to build a lot of sets for the interiors, corridors, rooms, control centres. And with a lot of science fiction films, television series in particular, but also on a number of features, the way they get over not having to build every single part of the many sets that they're going to need is to light the artists and then let the light fall off progressively on the set so that it goes into black. And in this way, of course, that probably saves 60% of the building that they would otherwise have to do. Well, I've not always been a happy person because I try to do everything as best I can, and that can be very wearing at times. And on Space 1999, I thought, well, I can't bear to shoot it like that. But equally, there's no way that we can afford to build all the sets that we're going to require through all the episodes. And so I came up with the idea of building the flats, that is to say, sections of the walls of the sets that are put together to form the set. I decided we would build the sets double-clad. In other words, both sides would be finished. On a normal film set, the side that you see when the show is completed is one side of the flat, and the other side is just canvas and wooden struts. But on Space 1999, every single section was built double-sided. And we then broke it down, and I can't remember the exact figures, but let's say we built 10 different types of doorways, perhaps 40 sections of plain wall, say 10 sections of wall which had windows and some of which were panoramic, and so on and so on. So we ended up really with a giant Lego set. And this meant that when we had to film, say in the medical department, well, the people who make the sets would simply select the pieces that they want, they would push them together, lock them together, and then bring in loads of medical equipment and hospital beds and so on. And hey presto, we had a medical section, and likewise with all the other sets that we required.
Oh. Look, why didn't you talk to her?
Yes?
Dr. Russell? John Koenig.
Commander?
Donalmeyer, 1887. As used by Louis Pasteur and Madame Curie, right?
It's a replica, a college prize.
Doctor, when will our Metaprobe astronauts recover from this virus?
It's not a virus. What they have is an unusual form of brain damage. Their condition is critical.
So they're not going to recover. What about the backup crew? Are they medically clear to fly this mission?
I can say they're as fit as astronauts Warren and Sparkman were before they were affected.
What's that supposed to mean?
Commander, I saw the 9th man die this morning. One moment he was fine. The next he lost all control. Here. This is a thermographic plate. A malignancy erupts. There's immediate disorientation of the kind that's classic in radiation attacks.
Doctor, you've had 11 cases so far.
9 deaths.
Yes, but all of those who died were workers at Nuclear Disposal Area 2. It's inconsistent. The 2 Metaprobe astronauts never went near that site.
I know. And there are more inconsistencies. No radiation leakage has ever been recorded there. But what is consistent is that the probe astronauts and the backup crews have lived the same lives, been through the same training program.
Are you saying the Metaprobe should not be launched?
What I am saying is that the backup crew appears to be medically fit. But as a doctor, because of the unknown factors, I can't guarantee that they won't be affected 3 days or 3 months out into deep space.
And you're saying medically the risk is unacceptable?
The risk is great. The decision, of course, is yours.
Doctor, I'd like to see the men. John Koenig.
Our problems in setting the show up didn't simply relate to the technical problems, of course. We had Martin Landau and Barbara Bain. And I remember I went to America with the president of ITC New York. And we went to Beverly Hills and stayed in the Beverly Hills Hotel. We hired Cabana 5, which was the one that was central in the pool. And we sat there all day long, sunning ourselves, negotiating to get Martin and Barbara. I met Martin and Barbara, and at the Beverly Hills Hotel, where they had their own cinema, we screened a film called Doppelganger, or the American title was Journey to the Far Side of the Sun, and they were very impressed. And I was very surprised they were impressed, but I was very glad. And they said, yes, okay, we'd like to do the series. We were then told by their agent that we would not be able to see them or speak to them again until a deal was signed. And so, as far as I remember, we spent about a week sitting by the pool outside Cabana 5, and there was a messenger going backwards and forwards from us to their agent and back again. And of course they were very big stars and they had a very good agent, and he made our life a misery because every time we made an offer he turned it down and said he wanted twice as much. And there were all sorts of things that they wanted in the agreement. One of the things I did to try and entice them was to say that we would run them back and forth to the studio, to a house in London which we would hire especially for them, and we would provide them with a chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce. And of course, being in America, that probably impressed them, but that wasn't the end of it. Anyway, the deal making went on for about a week, and the messenger was flying backwards and forwards, and we were in the main making all the concessions. And every time we had to make a major concession, we had to ring Lou Grade in London, who was putting up the money, to say, is this okay? And he said, yeah, carry on. But towards the end, he was getting a bit touchy about the whole thing because he could see it was going to cost a fortune. And then we called Lou and said, okay, we have a deal on the money that you've agreed. And he said, right, sign it. And shortly afterwards, the messenger came back with the immortal words that the agent says, there is one more point. And the last point they made, or an extra point they made, related to more cost. And the man I was with, the president of New York office of ITC, sat there and said, Jerry, we can't give up at this stage. I mean, we've been through all of this and we're damn nearly there. And you know, if we can only agree to this last point, we have a deal. And he looked at his watch and he said, Jerry, it's 11:30 in London at night. And Lou always goes to bed at 9 o'clock. He said, if we phone him, he'll go absolutely berserk. And there was a long silence, and he suddenly said, to hell with it. I'm going to call him. And he stood up and he marched with me in hot pursuit to his bungalow in the grounds. And I was thinking, God, this guy's brave. I mean, Lou will tear him to pieces. Anyway, he got to his bungalow and he dialed the number. At the time, it's one of those things you put your finger on the hole and turn it around and it would go back again. And then I was standing by the side of him. He had the telephone to his ear and I could hear the bell ringing in London. Brr, 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 brr. And the tension was terrible. And then I heard the sleepy voice of Lou Grade saying, hello? And this guy said, Lou, Jerry wants to talk to you. And he thrust this red-hot receiver into my hand, and I was confronted with Lou. It was a terrible shock. I didn't expect it. But fortunately, I got on well with Lou. He trusted me. I'd made a lot of films for him, and he was very kind. And I explained the situation, and he said, okay, but this is the last concession I'm going to make. And so we were able to get Martin Landau and Barbara Bain.
Point 1 check complete. Radiation normal. No leakage. We're going on to point 48.
Fine, Jackson. Well, it seems all right.
So far.
Commander, point 48 check complete. Radiation normal. No leakage.
Before we made Space 1999, there was a series called The Fugitive, an American series, which starred Barry Morse as the man who was hunting down the fugitive, who we, the audience, knew was innocent. But as far as I remember, had he been caught, he would be facing the death penalty. Barry Morse played a very, very tough and a very, very hard role in that series. And I used to love the series, and I used to love watching Barry Morse, and so I thought I'll get Barry Morse, and that was a much more easier negotiation because it took place in England, and we were able to talk to the agent eyeball to eyeball. Barry Morse was interested in doing the show, and so Barry Morse became the sort of third lead.
I want a breakdown of all recorded information on the training flights of the probe astronauts. I'd like them checked against the Eagle shuttle flights flown by Collins. Search for any correlation between them, any whatsoever.
Immediately, Commander.
Dr. Russell?
Commander, Dr. Mathias.
We also had posts, square posts that stood at intersections in the corridors, and these had a television monitor inset on each facet of the square. And of course the idea was, and of course it became very obvious when people saw the film, that anybody at any place on Moonbase could talk to anybody else, and Central Control could talk to everybody simultaneously. The only problem we had was that when Space 1999 was made, film stock, of course this was shot on 35mm, but the speed of the stock was very slow by comparison of today, and the colour pictures were not very bright, and consequently we couldn't get enough light to film the monitors, and so we had to sadly use black and white pictures throughout.
Died. Eric. Frank. Of what? I mean, I was told...
You were told lies. They died of an illness no one can understand. Earth Command wanted you to think it was a temporary setback.
But the metaprobe.
Forget the probe, Carter. Before we do anything more, I'm going to find out why those two men died.
There's no doubt about it. Planet Meta could be supporting life as we know it.
Yes, but the problem here may affect the metaprobe.
We must make a manned landing on Meta. Nothing must stop us.
The filming began. They sent an American scriptwriter over to write the first episode because I mean, I'm sure there'll be some Americans watching this DVD. And let me just say this. We English people love good American shows. There's no doubt about it that the Americans make wonderful movies and wonderful television series. But it's just rather sad that they think that they're the only ones that can do it. And so it was quite difficult to deal with them. But the series went into production, and unfortunately we were landed with not only an American writer for the first episode, but also with an American director whose name I will not mention, but I was told that he was the finest pilot director in America. That is to say, he specialized in making the first episode of any new television series so as to set the pattern. And he arrived, and he was a nice enough guy. We got on well. And he went on the floor, and I said to him, look, you've got 4 weeks to shoot this picture. That's double the normal length of time we allow for an episode, but we want you to do a really good job. And he started shooting. And he shot, and he shot, and he shot. And a month went by, and he still hadn't finished. I had to give him extra time. And finally, he completed the film and then took the next plane back to America. All the stuff that was shot was put into the cutting room, and they cut it all together. And the moment came where I was able to see the first episode without music and without sound effects, of course. And it ran for in excess of 2 hours, double the length. Well, of course, this was an absolute disaster. We were in a panic, and so was New York, particularly New York, because they put this guy in. Anyway, the fact was the film had been shot and it was over length, and I had to put it right. I went into the cutting room and I started to make massive cuts, cutting out whole sequences, until finally the film ran so that one could just about understand the story, but it was still over length. And so I had to write new sequences that would enable me to cut the film down further and yet keep the story legible and understandable. So I went in my office, I wrote the new connecting scenes. From what I remember, I think there were about 17 scenes, and I personally went back on the floor, and all of this had to be done with a great hurry because production was held up. And I shot the additional material, and as far as I remember, I shot it in about 3 days. And then there was a monumental amount of work went on in the cutting room. The picture was finished on length. All the special effects were brought in. The sound was laid. The music recorded. And we went into the dubbing theatre where the engineers mixed all the soundtracks together, and the film was completed. And it was immediately dispatched to New York, and I had to sit for a couple of days twiddling my thumbs, waiting to hear what the New York office had to say. And then at last, my secretary told me that the president of the New York office was on the phone and wanted to talk to me. And of course my heart was beating very fast, and he said something like, "Jerry, you're a miracle man. I've just seen the picture. It is absolutely fantastic." And he said, furthermore, the projectionist who showed the picture to me, who spent his life looking at all kinds of productions, feature films, television series, documentaries and so on, he came into the theatre and he said, I really hope you don't mind me saying this, but I think that this is really not a television series at all. This is a feature film. And so it was one moment in my life where I just felt so relieved, so happy and so proud. It's difficult for me to put it into words.
Look at this. It's a monitoring device from the old Area 1. It was used to record the magnetic output from the artificial gravity system there. When the area was closed down, it had nothing to record for 5 years, but now look at it.
It's a 20-fold increase in a magnetic field.
And that's before it burnt out. We've been obsessed with radiation. Wrong. This instrument's given me a lead. I think we're facing a new effect, arising from the atomic waste deposited here over the years. Magnetic energy outputs of unprecedented violence.
Magnetic energy responsible for the flare-up at Area 1.
Magnetic energy causing brain damage?
Something we didn't even think to check for, but I believe it was a sudden surge in magnetic field that wrecked your flight navigation system and blanked out the astronaut's flight recorder.
The probe astronauts flew over there daily, as did Collins and the shuttle.
Then we've all been exposed to it. We've all been to Area 2, and to get there, we turn over Area 1. Well, it could be a cumulative effect that hasn't as yet...
There's an even bigger problem I see looming up. Area 1 burnt itself out in a magnetic subsurface firestorm. What worries me now is that the same thing could happen in Area 2.
How much time do we have?
We need solid data on magnetic levels.
I won't be responsible for any more men out on the surface in these conditions.
Neither will I. We equip an Eagle to monitor magnetic levels and do it by remote control. Straight ahead. Easy. Straight as you go. Good. That's good, Paul. Hold that, Paul.
The other problem was in those days that when you started a film camera and aimed it at any television set or computer, the picture used to roll. In other words, it would gradually rise up, and you would see the bar between the frames go up, and then you see the next frame, and so forth and so on. Generally speaking, at that time, people accepted that that was the way you had to watch a movie or a television picture on a screen. But old Worryguts here couldn't accept that. And so we devised a situation where we had fittings made for the film camera so that when the film camera got up to speed, the film camera would actually create the time base on the television system. And as the film camera came up to speed, somebody would shout lock, and that meant that the pictures were locked. But of course, if you see Space 1999, or I should say as you're watching Space 1999, you'll see that the pictures on the television screens don't roll. They're all perfectly steady.
Magnetic radiation. Now we're sitting on the biggest bomb man's ever made. Commissioner?
Commander? My office tried to query you about your emergency code Alpha 1. You didn't seem to be available.
I am now.
Commissioner, the heat is starting to rise on the interior of Area 2 as well. Now, it contains 140 times the amount of waste in Area 1. With quantities like that, there could be a chain reaction.
What are the chances it could burn itself out? Like Area 1.
Simmons, you don't seem to understand. We're sitting on top of it. There is no chance.
Well, what's to be done?
Try and break the pile apart, rip up the rods, destroy the mass. If we could disperse the mass over a wider area.
All right. Come on, let's do it.
We do have limited time.
One of the things that was very important to this series was, of course, the special effects. And the special effects director was Brian Johnson. And he was the one who designed the Eagle, that is the main ship that was used by the people on Moonbase. It was a big surprise because, you know, instead of being streamlined like an aircraft, it was built from tubular steel. But I quickly realized that, of course, in space, you know, where there's a vacuum and therefore no resistance, anything can hurtle through space, no matter what shape it is. And in fact, the Eagle was ideal for the work it was going to do. And of course, it was wildly different to anything that had ever been made and presented on a science fiction show, television or feature film.
This is Eagle 1-4. Getting a bit of flicker on the navigation system. We'll check it out from here. It's getting worse. All over the place.
Uma, I want central computer updated with everything possible, constantly.
Number 26, dispersed to grid C9.
Repeat, dispersed to grid C9. Grid C is full now, 4. I'm moving over to G10.
Station Keeper here. 36, 60 calculation. Getting kind of excited.
Well, we've had navigational failures on 2 of the ships. They returned to base for replacements.
The magnetic field must be expanding.
Tell them to increase altitude.
Right. Main mission to all Eagles, increase altitude by 10.
Do you have an extra ship?
No, sir, they're all committed.
Well, take the Commissioner's Eagle into orbit. Report on how things look from up there.
Right.
Readings?
Heat level holding, magnetic field fluctuating.
That's what worries me.
I'm right behind you, man. Like I said. Steady 350. Steady open. 34. I think we should go up another 100, Commander.
Eagle 1 to Alpha.
Go ahead, 1.
Liftoff complete. Trajectory computed and programmed. I will be in orbit in 4 minutes. All levels are holding steady. You think we have it under control, John?
Too early to tell.
Well, I must say it does look pretty promising to me. Well done. Now, I have to issue a communique sooner or later. Well, it'll give us more time to consider our next move. You see, John...
I see men risking their lives to avert disaster, total disaster. Now, wake up, Commissioner. If this goes wrong, there won't be anybody to issue a communique. There will be no survivors.
Commander, it's going up!
Brian did a great job. When we made explosions for space, Brian put the explosive charge in the roof of the studio, and behind the charge the studio roof was painted black, and the camera, of course, was pointing vertically up towards the charge, which was put in the center of the screen. when the charge was detonated, the sparks and debris that were affected by gravity fell straight towards the camera. And of course, when the picture was put the right way up on the screen, it meant that we were looking at an explosion where, as the explosion took place, all the debris flew in a straight line towards the camera, as it would do for an explosion in space. And so that was another very important contribution to the realism of the film.
We're moving!
Alpha, can you hear me? Alpha, do you copy? Alpha, I'm not receiving you. Now, maybe you're receiving me. The moon is going out of the Earth's orbit. That explosion, it has pushed us out of the Earth's orbit. Alpha, can you hear me? Repeat. Alpha, are you okay?
Brian did many things on the series, and some of the stuff obviously were left to assistants of his for speed. But there's always an amusing situation on every show that one makes. And one day the insurance assessor came into my office and he said, Jerry, I've dealt with you for years. You're a very honest man and you always make fair claims and we always pay out. He said, but I can't pay out this one. I said, well, what is it? He said, well, one of the guys in the special effects department put an explosive charge in an eagle and he flew it on a wire into shot and then detonated the explosion and it blew the bloody thing to pieces. And he's made an insurance claim for a new eagle. I couldn't stop laughing. I thought it was just such a wonderful... It's like somebody who owns a house setting fire to it and then ringing the insurance company and saying, I've set fire to my house, I want to make a claim. It was as ridiculous as that. So, of course, there were lighter moments.
We're down to 3G. We're compensating. I see the whole disposal area has been acting like a gigantic rocket motor, pushing us out of orbit. But if it stopped fissioning, then we shan't be accelerating anymore. Carter might have a chance.
Carter, do you read me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Can you make it back to the base?
Yeah. I can make it. I'm closing now. I can make it.
Good, Captain.
Check out the base. This is main mission. All sections report.
Security section. We have audio contact. Video systems gone.
Service section. Lost all power. Operating on emergency systems.
Medical section, Paul. Explosive decompression in 2 compartments. Areas sealed off. No leaks. Sufficiently operational to accept casualties.
One of the many difficulties about making Space 1999 was that the president of the American office phoned me and said, Jerry, you will need our support on this series because we advise Lou Grade, your boss, on what is and what is not acceptable for America. And so I have to tell you, he said, that when you made UFO, you had one episode which was made the story was made on Earth, or based on Earth, and it was about Straker's home life and his child who was killed in a motor accident. That just so happened that was my favourite episode. But the American office said, if you're going to make Space 1999, I'm telling you, Jerry, we don't want any one episode shot on Earth. Every single episode must be shot in space. So I said, well, you know, it seems that I've got no alternative. If that's what I have to do to make the series, okay. I'll give you my word that I won't make any shows where the story is on Earth. And the guy I was talking to said, oh, no, Jerry, it's not as easy as that. I mean, I'm not going to take your word for it. I want you to ring me tomorrow and tell me how you've decided to make the show so that it's impossible for you to have a story on Earth. So, of course, I laid awake all night trying to think of how I could get out of this one. And the following day, I phoned New York and I said, okay, what if I blow the moon out of Earth orbit with all the people aboard? And he said, okay, you've got it. Go ahead. And so this really was how the storyline was formed. I think a lot of people think that these things are well planned and written in advance and so forth and so on, but that's not always the case. Space 1999 had a very, very rocky start, as I've just described.
We've been completely cut off from planet Earth. As we are, we have power.
Martin Landau, understandably, wanted to have on the screen a Californian tan. Made him look rugged and tough and good-looking, and there was no problem with that. But Barbara Bain, who was going to work alongside him throughout the series, she wanted the makeup people to make her very white, you know, pale and interesting. And of course, when they stood together in a two-shot, our cinematographer, the late Frank Watts, lovely man, very clever man, he would try to light them, but it was almost impossible because if the photographed sequence that he made went to laboratories and they tried to grade it, if they graded for Barbara Bain, then of course in her white makeup they had to keep the light down, and consequently Martin Landau looked almost black. And if they graded for him, in other words putting more light onto him, then Barbara Bain would almost look transparent. And so there was a great deal of difficulty in lighting the two. Eventually there was a compromise. She had to reduce her desire to look pale and interesting, and Martin Landau had to compromise on his Californian tan, and Frank Watts had to tear his hair out every time there was a two-shot, but he somehow managed it. Speaking of Frank Watt, normally anybody lighting a scene for anything, feature film or television series, wouldn't try any tricks with the camera, because every day's filming costs an absolute fortune. The stars, the crew, the equipment, the lights, the electricians, the stage itself. If anything went wrong, it would be an absolute financial disaster. But Frank Watt he built a box that he put on the side of the camera next to the lens, and he was able to, from that box, project all sorts of backgrounds and weird effects, so that a lot of the special effects were actually done on the day inside the camera. Very, very daring. I don't think anybody else would try it, but Frank did it, and he always succeeded.